pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the Bible, God's holy word. I'll make a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path, and hide its words in my heart, that I may not sin against God. This is Matt Singleton, and welcome to Bible Smack Ministries. Whoa. Alright, so today we're doing our third installment. This is American history from a New Testament perspective, and I'm not even figuring out what I'm going to title this yet, but I guess we'll call it Know the Law, and it's about the Puritan culture and what was going on in the 1600s. I'd like to have a little memory verse for us. This will kind of have a good caption for the history that we'll study today. And it says this in Romans chapter 7. And let me see if I can find my place. Alright, verse 12 through 14. Wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy, and just, and good. Was this then that which is good made death unto me? God forbid. But sin, that it might appear sin, working death in me, by that which is good, that sin by the commandment might become exceedingly sinful. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. Alright, so one thing you have to understand, and we're kind of focusing on the settlement in Massachusetts. Of course, they also had a settlement in Jamestown. The settlement in Jamestown was not by the Puritans. Jamestown settlement was more broadly British, and it was really focused economically. They weren't godless people, though. They actually came in and they claimed the land as a Christian nation. Okay? So it was always a religious culture, and it was very strict. This is a system still with kings. This is an old world. When you look at the Puritans, you have to understand that they are still kind of entrenched in that old world. Okay, even though they came across the ocean, there's a lot of the old world that's still in their mentality. Today I was just using some anecdotes that I learned here reading this book. This is The American Past, a Survey of American History by Joseph Conlon. Not really getting very deep as far as I don't know what this guy's perspective is. Obviously, I'd assume it'd be, this is a secular textbook. It is not a Christian textbook. But we want to focus on some lessons that are kind of learned here. But one thing I want to kind of hit on real early is that, this is the old world. And he kind of makes a note here. And this is John Cotton on democracy. See, the Reformed Calvinists were not Democrats. Okay? They would have a republic system, but they were not the democratic culture that you'd see with the Anabaptists. Alright? So here's one of the Puritan ministers, John Cotton. And he says, the Puritans did not believe in democracy. John Cotton, 1584 to 1652, that was his life, the most influential minister in the early years of Massachusetts Bay, put it this way in a letter to England: democracy I do not conceive that ever God it ordain as a fit government, either for church or for commonwealth. If the people be governors, who shall be the governed? Okay? So they just assumed that the natural order that they grew up under, okay, they grew up under the Catholic feudal system. All right, the Catholic feudal system has the kings, and it has the serfs, and it has the soldiers and the merchants, and there were classes. Okay, so that type of mentality has not escaped these people. All right, and that's going to prove detrimental, because then you're going to see things like, what happens with the issue of slavery. Well, they figured that everything's deterministic. You're either born rich or you're born poor. So that's not going to help when the issue of slavery comes up. But also, their renewal is not going to be a renewal of, like, let's get into something more advanced or something like that. Their ideas are going to be, let's get more biblical. Now, this is not their mission to copy the Bible. They're still what I'd call reformers, mainline Protestants. And because they're reformers and mainline Protestants, their idea is that they see the church as the Catholic Church. And they want to make it a more biblical Catholic model. But it's still Catholic. It's still universal, and that bleeds into government ideology and stuff like that. And so basically, this is going to be this alternative, more Old Testament type of Catholicism. Well, anyhow, there's a lot of experiments and life lessons learned as we kind of go through this. One is the idea of, economics. Is the best system the the system of, like, let's spread the wealth around, okay? What we would call today is socialism, liberalism, Marxism, communism, whatever. But, I mean, basically, the idea of, communal living, the idea of let's have everything out divided amongst each other. Well, here's what it says here. This is on page 34. It says, in some ways, the experience of the Pilgrims paralleled that of the first Virginians. There was a starving time that almost destroyed the colony. During the first winter, 44 of the 102 original colonists died of malnutrition or disease. Like Virginia, Plymouth experimented with a strict, regulated communal society. The company owned everything. The colonists worked in supervised gangs and were allotted what they needed in order to live. Also, as in Virginia, the system did not work. It was difficult for people who awakened daily to see the sight of broad lands for the taking to be content as employees who were regulated at every turn by the sound of a bell or the cry of an overseer. Married women grumbled because they had to cook and mend for bachelors who were assigned to their households. The bachelors, in turn, complained that they worked as hard and as long as the husbands, but were paid less. It seemed Governor William Bradford that everyone had a grievance against the communal character of Plymouth, and after little more than a year, he distributed farmland among the families. So basically, it started turning into a capitalism in order to survive. And this is the problem. Big government is always a problem, okay? When you treat people as slaves, then people are not living up to their full potential. We come, originally from Adam, and Adam was to have what? He had dominion over the earth. So basically, man is made naturally to have dominion. Well, they can't have dominion when they're a bunch of slaves. So then, you think, well, maybe this is all the fault of the law, Maybe if we were in a, maybe if these people were more like hippies and, the lawless types, then everything would be great, You just lay back and forget it all, man. All right, well, there is a colony that got forgotten about. Some of the settlements didn't last. Many English settlements in North America have not remembered because they were abandoned or absorbed by those that survived. The most interesting was Marymount, located near what is now Quincy, Massachusetts, a few miles from Plymouth. In 1623, a curious character named William Morton arrived at Plymouth in a servant ship commanded at Captain Wollaston. The captain disliked the area and left for Virginia with most of his servants. He apparently intended to send for the rest, but Morton led a peaceful rebellion among them, persuading those who remained, in the words of the Plymouth Governor Bradford, to join in a colony where they would be, quote, free from service and trade, plant, and live together as equals. Morton presided over a riotous style of life. So, this is kind of one of the first guys, hey man, you don't tell me what to do. We're going to have peace and love. So it says, Morton presided over a riotous style of life that infuriated the austere Puritans. Like many of the pioneers after them, the Merry Mounters were frequently drunk. And they set up a maypole, drinking and dancing about many days together, inviting the Indian women for their consorts, dancing and frisking together. They got, squaws and, had their, bow wow. So basically, here they are. They got a pole. We got the women's. Yeah, come on, it's a party. Everybody's going nuts. This is great, ain't it? Boom. It says, frisking together like so many fairies and furies, rather, and worse practices. You don't want to know. What goes on by the pole stays by the pole. Worst of all, Morton seems to have stolen the Indian trade from Plymouth. He offered guns in return for furs and hides. This worried Governor Bradford because the Indians were better hunters than the whites by reason of their swiftness of foot and nimbleness of body. White people weren't so nimble. Anyway, so basically, they were, faster, and they knew the land, and he's thinking, we're giving them guns? It's about love. Give the other guy the gun, and I get fur. Yeah, boy. So, it says, he resolved to break up the colony and sent Captain Miles Standish and a few other men to arrest Morton. There was no battle because, according to Bradford, Morton and his friends were too drunk to shoot. The only casualty was a Merry Mounter who staggered into a sword and split his nose. Hey, man, you're trying to keep me down. Morton was put on an uninhabited island to await the next ship bound for England. However, the Indians brought him food and liquor. He managed to slip away, returning to his own to England, where he denounced the Pilgrims in words as impassioned as Bradford's. Neither he nor Plymouth was punished, however, and Morton later returned to America to lead a quieter life. I'll just cut that one off there. Alright, so basically, it's just not made to survive. When you get into these social ills and stuff like that, you can't even fight the people trying to break you up. You're just too drunk, so obviously, we kind of see where that leads. Well, let's see here. And then, how legalistic, though, were these guys getting, though? I mean, it's like, could they really be that bad? Could, imposing law. Well, they didn't just impose the law, they imposed their traditions and their interpretations of the law. The law books of the Massachusetts and other New England colonies were filled with regulations that, in the late 20th century, would be considered outrageous or ridiculous. God commanded that the Sabbath be devoted to Him, and therefore the Puritans forbade on Sunday activities that on any other day were perfectly in order. Working, playing games, such as was the custom in England, idle chatter, singing, whistling, breaking into a run, walking in a garden. Some things were permitted in private, but not in public. For example, married couples were forbidden to embrace or kiss in public. A sea captain returning home after a voyage of several years' duration kissed his wife at the door of their cottage. He was fined. And it says, other minor offenders, for example, a woman who was a scold, heard nagging too often in public, spent a few hours in the stocks or the pillory on market day, subjected to ridicule. See, they're not that bad. More serious crimes, such as wife beating, were punished by public flogging. Now, you see, that is good, though, okay? I mean, don't sit there spending time like, oh, we're going to fine you, and we're going to do this to your record. You know, just, I mean, if he beats his wife, beat his A, okay? Excuse my French. Beat his bottom. So, it says, lest the Puritans be thought unduly harsh, almost all the colonies had similar laws. See, there is a tradition here. And in one particular, the Puritans were far more lenient than other Englishmen, because the Bible was their guide in these, as in the other matters. The Puritans reserved capital punishment for those offenses that were merited the death penalty in the good book. Murder, treason, witchcraft, and several sexual offenses, incest, homosexuality, and bestiality. Adultery was also a capital crime, but the ultimate penalty was rarely exacted for it. In 1695, a law of Salem, Massachusetts, punished adulterers by requiring them to wear a cloth, A, on their clothing for life, although the psychological consequences for this law provided the inspiration for Nathaniel Hawthorne's great novel, The Scarlet Letter. Now, one thing that you ought to remember, now he's doing a little bit of interpretation there. When you see the covenant of Noah in the book of Genesis, it's only a capital punishment for murder. It's in the code of Moses under the law that we see the extended death penalty. One thing to remember is that the law, you know, a lot of people assume that the law is the eternal and permanent and stuff, but actually there's these things called statutes, and everything is fitted perfectly into a context of the times. You know, I only lived, let's say, about a half a block from a donkey once. So other than that, I couldn't really covet donkeys, okay, because my neighbors didn't have donkeys, all right. My friend Jeremy saw that donkey, though, so he might have coveted it. But anyhow, basically, this is the Puritan system. They're bringing the law, they're misinterpreting the text, and then they're applying that over for this big government situation. And that's when you get all these problems. Look at Massachusetts today. If Massachusetts of the colony period met the Massachusetts of the day, they would just kill them. Period. They would just grab a gun and start firing. Okay? And some of that is kind of like, you know, the legalistic parent. You know, they just get after their kid, and they get after their kid, and they get after their kid, and then what happens? Well, there's a rebellion. Well, you know, that's basically what's happening with Massachusetts. Massachusetts went from this theocratic start, and now it's off into a satanic communistic state. So that's kind of what you see happen. You have to be careful about this whole idea. And the whole idea is this, you know, push of, you know, we can, you know, act on God's behalf to control other people. That is not the gospel. When Jesus was at the cross, or he was about to be on the cross, he said to Pontius Pilate, he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And we have to take that seriously. Well, one guy did. And that is Mr. Rogue. If I can find him here. And that is the guy who started Rhode Island, which is Roger Williams. Rhode Island, Providence Plantation, still the long official name of the small state, was founded by the brilliant, zealous, and cantankerous Puritan preacher Roger Williams. In Massachusetts in 1630, he quarreled with his friend John Winthrop and with the colony over colony's other leaders almost before he settled in. Not that Williams was anti-Puritan, he was the strictest sort of Puritan. It was his demanding conscience, more rigorous with himself than with others, that led to his banishment from Massachusetts Bay. Williams believed that the English had no right to settle in America unless the Indians granted them the title to the land. In sermon and pamphlet, he attacked the Puritans' assumption that the King's Charter gave them a legal and moral right to be there. This argument disturbed Winthrop and his allies, not because of the cost involved in buying the land from the Indians, no one, including Williams, ever paid them very much for the land, but because in denying the validity of the colony charter in one particular, Williams was striking at the Puritans' most valued possessions, the King's grant of their right to govern themselves. Now, one thing to remember is that Williams, he's a Baptist. Okay, Williams, they say he started the First Baptist Church, but that is not necessarily New Testament church. Roger Williams believed that the church was dead, and that would kind of focus more to people in the Restoration movement. It would focus more to, the cults and stuff like that. This idea that the church just died. Okay, we try to recover, but we don't recover because it's dead. We radically reform. There's always been a Christianity that was true. Okay, so basically he's very close to the New Testament, but there is some things off. And what you see with him is, you have this thing of valuing people's rights. Okay, showing that love. All right. And it came actually not by not getting too much into the Bible. It came by getting into the Bible more. When I started a church, I hit that phase. I started thinking, okay, I'm going to hit every single rule and all this kind of stuff and make this New Testament church. And what happened was I started finding out that there was more freedom. There was just more stuff available. So Roger Williams was the first one to really start pushing religious liberty. Him to start caring about the Indians' rights, all these things. This is what you see in the Baptist tradition. It's more of a Christian libertarian political ideology. Okay, it is very personally strict because we believe in godliness and holiness and all these things, but it is not imposing this. Okay. It is basically working with people and showing people by example. And so that's how, it kind of works when you get towards New Testament Christianity. And we'll go back and talk about a little bit more next episode.